Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this new Fleet Europe webinar in partnership with Visa. The topic of today is about EV charging and making it as seamless as possible. We all know that we have more and more electric vehicles on the roads. You also have more and more electric vehicles in your fleets. And one of the concerns that you have probably today, but also in the near future, is how can you charge those electric vehicles easily? And so this is what we are going to examine today. The topic is reimagining the EV charging experience for fleets, and we have invited three topic matter experts to discuss with us how to make sure that we have a more seamless EV charging experience. I would love to start presenting our guests in this webinar, and I will start with Matt Pretorius. He is the head of fleet solutions at Octopus. Octopus Energy, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the biggest energy suppliers in the UK, but they are much more than that. Matt, welcome. Welcome in this webinar. I hope that you are doing well.
Very well yourself?
Yeah, doing great. It's nice to have you. Just briefly, Matt, if you would, let's say, mention your company in one sentence, what would it be?
We are a charging partner for the UK and Europe.
Okay, perfect. My second guest today is Neil Halls. Neil is the Director B2B Mobility at Visa, our supporting partner in this webinar. So Neil, also welcome to you. Yes,
thanks, Stephen.
We all know Visa, of course, but why is the topic of EV charging so exciting and so important for your company, Visa?
Yeah, thank you. I think we're in a very clumsy period with regards to EV payments. Visa is a network with our interoperability across different devices and being able to create acceptance across the world. We feel we're in a really good place to start to support the innovation which needs to happen in this market. So great to speak today around this.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for being with us. And then our final guest today, ladies and gentlemen, is Sarah Sloman. She is the Chief Strategy Officer at PayTrue. Sarah, also welcome in this webinar, and I hope that you are doing well. Can you enlighten us with what PayTrue is all about?
Yes, what a gang. This is going to be an amazing webinar. So pleased to see so many of you come along to hear about what the future might hold for EV. So PayTrue is essentially a payment service provider. We're designed for the EV charging ecosystem, and we're based in the UK.
Okay. Perfect. So let's kick off. Ladies and gentlemen, you also will have the opportunity to ask your questions to our expert panel. The only thing that you need to do is to submit your question via the chat function in our tool. And then throughout the webinar, I will have a look and see what kind of interesting questions have come in. And I will ask those questions to our experts. Would love to kick off with Sarah. Sarah, we all know that EV charging is a vital ingredient of the complete EV experience, but apparently fleets have some issues. What is for you the main issue that you are seeing, the main pain point when it comes to EV charging that you are seeing with your customers?
Thank you. I think the first thing I'd say is that particularly in the UK, the infrastructure that we have is designed pretty much for the private vehicle, not necessarily for light commercial vehicles who have their own set of problems and challenges. Now, I look at this from a very unique lens. I have been in the hardware space, the CPO space, and now I'm in the finance and tech space. So I'm trying to solve this problem one stage at a time. And an incredibly depressing statistic that 20% of maintenance call outs are to do with the payment terminal, something so simple as that. Even if you found a charger you could use, there's a 1 in 5 chance that it might not work just because of the payment terminal infrastructure deployed on that site. It's not fit for purpose at this point. So I'm here to raise awareness of the correct pathway for procurement to choose the right hardware to go alongside to make fleet's life a lot easier. I'm looking for a future where the fleet driver can tap and go get their VAT receipt, be able to do the reimbursement and easily locate their next charger on their day. So there's a lot to do, but generally I think payments forms a much larger part of the puzzle, and I think not enough people talk about it. So that's why I was completely delighted to see that you were doing this today.
Okay, perfect. Neil, of course, Visa, well known in everything that has to do with payment solutions. If you look at the biggest pain point that you are seeing currently, is it the same pain point that Sarah just pointed out, or do you have another one for us?
Well, yeah, I certainly acknowledge what Sarah said. I think maybe where we've come from to begin with in this space, especially from a card issuance perspective, we've done quite a lot of research with fleet managers and end users to really kind of understand what the experience is like. And I've even done some ethnographic recently on my own, which is being quite sad and going up and speaking to van drivers, recharging and finding out how are you paying for this and what's your experience like. And I think the thing that we are looking to try and solve in Europe is the fact that you have to carry multiple payment types. So if you think from a general consumer experience, imagine if every supermarket you went to, okay, you might have loyalty cards, but you had to take out different payment cards and then they end up in different bank accounts. And then you're trying to, at the end of the month, bring all your data together. That's what fleet managers are having to do. They're having to juggle the multiple cards which are being carried around by the drivers, plus what I'm hearing and what we're seeing from the research is pay and claim as well. So drivers out of pocket making claims where cards aren't working. So traditional, what we call like closed loop cards aren't operating correctly. And then imagine at the end of the month, as a fleet manager, you've got to try and reconcile that into making sense. And also think of the risk of fraud that then creates around. So I think for us, having a single source of truth and being able to have one card which does everything, but adding on the benefits of the data that you see in some of these closed loop or RFID transactions is really where our vision is from a payments company. And very much our role is to try to create that technology for others to build solutions and innovate from.
Okay, that's clear. Matt, also for you, what is the biggest pain point that you are seeing as an energy supplier?
So I echo what Neil and Sarah have said, but without repeating that, if we build on that, I think a lot of the fleets are struggling with price transparency. So when they tap to pay, are they going to pay the retail price? Are they going to pay with the transaction fee or something over the top of it? Is the discount that they've agreed based on their fleet size? Is that built in? Can they trust that? And having a mechanism to find the price they are paying is the price that will end up on their invoice, I think is what fleets really need to actually then drive this all forward. So they can trust that process and add more fleet without having to look into the detail of their hundreds and thousands of vehicles. They just need that element of transparency or trust.
Perfect. Would love to go a little bit deeper into those pain points that you all just mentioned, but I would love to start first with comparing the current situation in terms of EV charging and the payment solutions around EV charging with what we all have seen and known from, let's say, the traditional fueling payment methods. Would love to start with Neil here. If you compare both the current situation of, let's say, the EV charging payment solutions, that ecosystem, how it's working, with what has been happening in the fuel, with the fuel cards and with all the fuel payments, what would be your conclusion?
Yeah, I think potentially with EV rollout, we've kind of sleptwalk a little bit into having multiple payment acceptance. So I talked about carrying multiple cards. This is exactly the same actually in the traditional fuel world. So actually the pain point from carrying multiple fuel cards and multiple payment types isn't something that's new. As the retail fuelers release cards which potentially add discount and create loyalty to certain forecourts, then it's exactly the same situation we've seen, and no learnings have necessarily been taken as we go into EV. So we're still in that space. So actually, I think what you'll find, Stephen, is across both, none of those experiences are particularly favourable today.
Sarah,
the fallback I was just going to say the fallback you've got is obviously you have across all the forecourts, you have acceptance for EMVCo, which is a scheme like Visa or some of the other schemes available. So you always have that fallback option, which I guess is the slight difference that you see in the EV space.
Sarah, do you want to add something on what Neil just mentioned?
Yes, I would. I think you're right to show that this is very much in its infancy. I think that's where the motivation, particularly on my side, comes from. Is if we get this right now, we can make a big difference before that mass adoption hits us. I mean, Visa, one of your reports, I think said 90% of fleets are using fuel cards. But when I say fuel cards, it's with the S on the end, because it's 2 to 3 of them, because there is no one size fits all fuel card that exists. And this is where I'm hoping we're going to dive a little deeper into the whole open loop side of things. And just to back that up even more, Allstar's recent report from late last year said that a driver can expect to pay around £3,000 if they use predominantly the public charging network, compared to £900 at home. So there's a huge dearth there. There's a huge gap between what somebody's expected to pay out and about versus what somebody with a driveway can pay at home. So there's a more sort of moral debate going on here behind the scenes as well, as to how do we level that playing field? How do we close the gap? And how do we make electric vehicle charging more appealing than our wet fuel equivalent?
Okay, well, asking the questions is answering them. So, Matt, what needs to be done to make sure that we will have, in the end, that, let's say, one payment solution that can cover everything, also in terms of charging, that we exactly know if something is working, if something is broke, etc.? Why hasn't it been already the case today? Sorry.
That's okay. So, I mean, what we are looking to do is to have multiple different mechanisms for you to start and stop your charging. We talked about having physical cards. They're fantastic until you reach a terminal where, as Sarah mentioned, there's something wrong, or it won't start the charging. So have that linked to a mobile app, and to say, look, I can find my charging location. Here it is. Here's my price, and I can start the charging from the mobile app. But the mobile app and the card is linked to the same account. So regardless where you start or stop the charge, it's linked together. Then you can take that further. You can add that to a virtual payment wallet, Apple Pay, Google Pay. Again, they give you another mechanism to start and stop the charging. And then basically take those three elements and put that into a map, so you can find your charging from the start. You can see your price. I think that's where we want to get to, and that's really going to help the fuel drivers switch into EV.
Mm-hmm. Neil, why aren't we already there yet?
That's a good question. If I had the magic ball to look back, I think, as I said, I use terminology, we sleptwalk into this situation, but there's so much complication around EV, and I'm no hardware expert, but I've been to enough conferences to see that the challenges of getting EV chargers in the right place with the right infrastructure, power, and everything that goes with it. I think not necessarily the end-to-end experience is being considered before, and it's quite a reactionary world that we've kind of become used to. One thing that's really interesting, so we're sponsoring something called the Best EV Hub, and it's a really good initiative looking at how people are innovating around EV charging. And so I had the pleasure of going to Madrid recently to see Moave's new EV and fuel hub, and it was quite amazing, really. And I think what was interesting is they've almost stopped just rollout and thinking, okay, how can we create an experience which is great for EV charging, but also what people do at the site? And the idea around creating a hub of activity where you can be functional during those downtimes, seamless payments that come with that. They had some amazing cafe experience, and there was a big group of about 13 business people having a meeting, which was really quite surprising to me, but they'd kind of congregated to do so. And I think we've come to a point where we've been reactionary. If we can start to tear that up a little bit and think, how am I going to attract an end-to-end experience, and how can I create a value proposition across that? I think that's when we start to see change in experience, but also in the adoption, when it starts to become less of a concern and remove some of those anxieties.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sarah, you mentioned your pain point at the start of this webinar. How long do you think it will take before that all those pain points that we just mentioned are taken away? Are we
I'm
talking
really-
about 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Well, I'm super pleased with the progress we've made already. I've been in the industry a long time, talking about 2010 was the first charging unit that got put in. And I've seen us take an exponential acceleration, pun intended, this last few years, because we used to talk about range anxiety. We used to be concerned that the vehicles didn't go farther enough. Then we started talking about charger anxiety. Will I be able to find it? Will it work when I get there? Will there be an internal combustion engine blocking it and I can't use it? Well, it was a year ago that I coined the phrase payment anxiety. Will it take my payment? Will I get the right price? Will it show up on my fleet statement, like Matt was saying? Will it take the card I want, like Neil was pointing to? So if we've managed to make that much progress with the hardware and the infrastructure and the OEM support in the last 3 years, I have high hopes that we're going to be in so much better position by 2030 when those deadlines hit, particularly for that light commercial vehicle market. But it is worth pointing out that as Paythrough, we are entrenched in this. We work globally looking at different solutions to the problem, and they all exist. All of those solutions out there exist. The difficulty we're facing is that we're not asking the right questions to the right people. We're asking the businesses who are putting the infrastructure in, what do they need and what do they want? We should be asking, what do the drivers need and what do the drivers want? Without their revenue, you've got no profit margin. I think it needs flipping on its head.
Okay. Thank you for the answer. And that also gives me the opportunity to mention again to the audience, if you have questions for our panel, if you have the questions that your drivers are asking with regards to EV charging and EV charging payment solutions, then you can submit those questions in the chat. And I'm happy to take those questions and ask them to our experts. Sarah, you mentioned already, and also Matt, Matt, you mentioned the pain point around price transparency, and that brings me to something that probably everyone here in the room has already experienced. I remember that I was driving to Brittany in France in my full electric car, and I thought that it would be very easy to charge your EV in every possible city community in the north of France. Well, that was not the case. I don't know how many apps I needed to download. I don't know how many cards that I had with me. And I don't even know what it has cost me because it was a mess. It was a complete mess. I would love to know, why is it so difficult that there are so many different cards, different payment systems, and different prices? And I specifically want to know, what can we do about it? And I would like to start with Neil first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, look, Visa's view on this, I guess, is that we think a single open loop card with access across those different charges is important. I think the thing that differentiates, and Sarah touched on this, open loop, and it's a term that's used quite a lot, open loop and closed loop, and it's, you know, perhaps not easy when you're not in the payment world. Payment terminology, I think you learn every day. But the idea of an open loop card means that that single card that you can have can be embedded across different devices. So although you might have to take different cards and download different apps, if your payment type and the card that you put on file for each of those apps, so to what Matt talked about, I think he's going to explain a little bit more about what they're doing. If you embed that, you can embed that single card into your Apple Pay wallet, your Google Pay wallet, for example. You can even embed it into vehicles for connected car payments and any payments which are coming through there. You can pay with the card. So whatever happens and wherever you push that, all that data and all that insight comes back to a single source of truth. So for me, I think, you know, there's still job to be done on making sure that point of sale acceptance is there. But to Matt's point, you know, a decent app with a card integrated into it also really serves well and creates other use case opportunities such as virtual card issuance too.
Okay, Matt, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, what my view is that there are so many charging point operators, CPOs, they're all vying for space to attract the drivers, to give them the best experience, to give them loyalty rewards, all that thing. And listen, it is fantastic. It drives competitiveness. It drives the price down. It drives, the ability for more charges to go up. But I think on over the top of that, we, to Sarah's point, I think we need to think about the customer at the end of the day. I mean, like you said, Stephen, I have multiple cards with £5-10 worth of credit all over the place. And I mean, I think to get to a point where we can have one app or one card, and whether it is you want it billed to the company or you want a payment card behind it, I think that is what we should do for the customer. And when I say the customer, I'm talking about the passenger car, the van, the EHGV, anything like that should all be in the same place, because if in a fleet perspective, you have a multitude of vehicles, not just thinking of the passenger car. But then what's going to come in the next months, not even years, as Sarah said, she's seen the industry change in the last 15 years. Plug and charge is right around the corner, to be fair. So when you pull up and you plug your vehicle in, you shouldn't need to have a card or thing. It should just plug in and work. And that's what I'm really, really excited about. So having a payment card or having some kind of mechanism straight behind it, where the car recognizes where it needs to be charged, who's going to pay for it, and just basically starts the charge.
Mm-hmm. Sarah, I saw you nodding yes. Is there something that you want to add? Otherwise, I will ask you a follow-up question.
Oh, what a tease. I wonder what the other question would have been. There is something I would like to add, which is, yes, plug and charge is going to be amazing. It really is. You're still going to need the driver to understand that process and authenticate the charge and know which card, or crucially, which sort of cost center within that fleet structure needs to be invoiced. So yes, plug and charge, amazing. It feels like we should sort of get on board with the OEMs turning that on, the manufacturers turning that on, the charge point operators turning that on. Again, like I said earlier, the technology exists, and that's what I love about this space. The difficulty is the persuasion, the bit in the middle. Let's get it switched on. In terms of what are we doing about it, I think listening to the customer is absolutely key. And I will clarify, I do mean the driver. And we know from our various research papers, our partnerships, that it really boils down to get rid of confusion over charging costs, streamline those transactions and notifications, make sure you know what you're paying for. But the biggest one of all, pre-authorization. My favorite app on my phone is my Apple Wallet. I open my card, I tap and I go. I don't even really that often look at the price, the pence per kilowatt hour, because I probably really need it. So ultimately, I'm there to point out we need to reduce those payment failures, number one, so that's a hardware issue. We need to think about the driver's seamless transaction process. So the quicker they pay, the quicker you get paid. That's number two. And three, remove any ambiguity, any strange foibles that happen in the finance sector. The driver doesn't care. They just want to take the energy and go. And as soon as we can get there, the better. What was the question you were going to ask me?
Well, I will ask that a little bit later, because there's just a question that popped in from one of the participants. And so I'm going to start with that one. And it's based also on something that you mentioned, Sarah, as we heard that 20% of the issues at charging stations were related to payment systems. Do you see the future being wider acceptance of cards at EV charging stations, or do you see the future in working with the car manufacturers to instead add a card to a vehicle and use it as a plug and charge, as you mentioned? Someone that wants to answer that question?
It's a quick one from me. Yes. No, it would be fantastic if there was a way to be really interactive with your vehicle. So whether that's a vehicle you step into that day because you're a contracted fleet driver, you are told which card to accept once you're in there. It's often on the head-up display unit within the vehicle or on the app. So we still haven't escaped from that user interaction for doing your payment, but it does tie up the loose ends at the back end.
Yeah, and I think to add from me, having worked in innovation for Visa before, I think one of the simplest things that we used to say is we want payments to disappear, because no one wakes up in the morning and wants to make a payment. Okay, that the payment is there because pretty much everything you do in life, unfortunately, turns out to cost something, and so you have to make that payment. But we don't want to make a art of the payment itself. We want it to be as simple as possible. So if that's through plug and charge technology with a card embedded into that vehicle, and we can have the right level of authentication for the security which Open Loop and Visa cards can provide, then I think we're all for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you already work together with car manufacturers, Neil, to examine sort of this?
Yes, and so we've got a global team that work on in-car payments. We've done quite a lot of work on that today. I think I've been involved in some in Europe as well. Originally Daimler Pay, which was embedded into their vehicles. I think for me, and this is very much anecdotal in my opinion, not an official position, but I think from an OEM, from an in-car perspective and those kind of payment types, there's certainly been a big focus on consumer and loyalty. So ensuring that the next service is within the network, is there upsell opportunities, which is absolutely right, and that customer ownership. I think for the fleet world and the EV world, where it comes to more commercial vehicles, I think we're starting to now see that innovation coming through and seeing some good initiatives in the market. And I think the power that the manufacturers potentially have with the data in the vehicle and being able to support, crossing the payment data with the in-car data could be really interesting for the future.
Okay, perfect. Then I come to the question that I wanted to ask, and that's about cost predictability and price transparency. As we still see that there are so many differences when it comes to price, even in between cities, in between countries, also between operators, if you charge at home, at the depot, or in public, it becomes quite a puzzle. And is there something that you as an industry and perhaps also the policymakers could do to support more price transparency and cost predictability? Would love to start with Matt on this one.
Well, that's a big question. I think, regulation needs to come into force, and there's been much debate around VAT on home charging versus public charging. And I think to help EV transition, I think that needs to be looked at. But then I think we also need more transparency around the actual cost of public charging. To name one of our CPO partners, Osprey did a fantastic little video and posted it recently. They've explained to drivers how the cost of the charge element kind of worked up. So it was a cost of the energy, a cost of the infrastructure, a cost of the networks, and basically how the 80 pence per kilowatt derived. So I think having that out there gives an understanding that there is costs behind this and how you get to that. And if we get that out to all our drivers, they can understand as to it's not just a cost we just made up overnight and said it's all profit. Most of the charging operators here are trying to drive down the cost. But I think, like you said, I think regulation needs to come over that at some point, and more needs to be done in this area.
Sarah?
The cost one is a good one. There's lots of versions of that video going around, and it is good because it explains that it's not a profiteering exercise. You're absolutely right there. And let's think about it. There's been billions, if not trillions globally in the next few years invested, which needs to be paid back. We get that. This is new infrastructure. Now, I think the sadness comes when you aren't able to recharge at home. And this will hit the light commercial vehicle driver the hardest, right? In the Glassdoor website, you can see salary expectations report that it's £23,000 a year for a self-employed driver. Now, if you're going to be going around and having to use the public charging network at places that your vehicle, your van, actually fits in, you won't have the luxury of choosing between the pence per kilowatt hour differences out there. That's not going to be a consideration for you. That commercial bottom line is everything in fleet charging. So I'm looking to the commercial sector. I'm thinking about the fact that the fuel market's worth 40 billion alone, and that half of that, KPMG reckon half of that is forecourt sales. So it's showing that people are spending lots of money when they refuel, even if they're there for 5 or 6 minutes. So is there a way that instead of knocking pence off that kilowatt hour price for our fleet drivers, there's a way to make their life easier and kinder and nicer through discounts, incentives, through points, to make it holistically feel like they're taking a discount, even if it's not the CPO, the charge point operator, who pays for that?
Neil, why is the EV charging payment ecosystem not going into the same direction as, for example, the telecom industry, where you also already have, let's say, a more balanced agreement in terms of minimum and maximum rates, etc.? This is not yet, I think, the case when it comes to EV charging. Is this something that could or should happen, or is this not really worthy to mention?
I mean, it's not something I have a strong opinion on. I think the challenges is what Matt and Sarah brought up around like the Osprey video of the costings is you are going to have different profitability at different sites. So having consistent pricing, if you think about the scale and infrastructure of wet fuels today, it's such a well-trodden process. It's seamless logistics, able to understand margins to a very granular level and set pricing accordingly. I think you don't have that luxury at the moment, and I think that's probably the biggest challenge. So until we've got more charges and more reliable, consistent network, I think that's going to be challenging. Potentially, obviously, it does drive the loyalty, but again, I think loyalty at the moment, I have heard people that are loyal to certain places based on their experience that it's reliable, but actually, can't always just decide where you want to go. You need to go where the range is and where your location is. So I definitely think that would be something that comes in the future, but I think personally, from what I can see at the moment, it's a bit early for that.
Okay. There's a question that popped in. I'm going to ask it. It's a question for you, Neil. What additional data can be provided by Visa in the future? With a few examples, for example, the kilowatt hour charged, VAT rates, merchant information, more transaction related data. Will that be delivered in the near future?
That's a very nice question. So I'll happily take that. So Yassine, so we've built a product, and we're looking at this market across EV, B2B mobility, and fleet. We're not a product, but we do have a product which works quite well in this space. So we have a solution called Visa Fleet 2.0, which is a payment card that also allows data to flow through transactions. So kilowatt hours that are charged, time at location, information that you would get today through a traditional RFID or other agreement app that you might use. So the idea of this is that actually it means that anyone can innovate across the market without being restricted by access to data and having to have interoperable contracting through that to get hold of it. So it's a way of opening up the ecosystem. If you open up the ecosystem, you get innovation. That's what we see. Now we have there is a acquirers who acquire for charge point operators will have to ensure that where Visa Fleet 2.0 cards are accepted, that this data is flowing, and so that's coming over the next year or so. And I think that's a really great grounding for what we can do in this space to bring that single card to life.
Okay. Now I would love to tackle a specific element that Sarah, you already brought up, the recommendation to optimize the EV charging experience to big fleets that have a mixed fleet with large commercial vehicles. Also, we already heard that for commercial vehicles, public charging can even be more challenging than for private vehicles, but often with commercial vehicles, there are also multiple drivers that will use that vehicle and perhaps need to charge at different places, etc. So how to overcome that challenge related to commercial vehicles? What can your company also bring onto the table to, let's say, make the EV experience in terms of light commercial vehicles more seamless? We'd love to start with Sarah and then Matt.
Thank you. Okay, good. Thank you. So in terms of what Paythrough are doing, we are entrenched in the market space. And much like Neil, I'm usually sidling up to someone to ask them a difficult question about something. Look out, charging hubs everywhere. But I've experienced it firsthand. I've been delighted to be part of things like the EV Rally, where we do take very difficult vehicles around the country, and we're going to the continent in May, just to really put this infrastructure through its paces and report back. The Green Fleet EV Rally does that so beautifully, because we had a 40-tonner on a, but the e-Actros 600, the Mercedes truck. It broke records how brilliant it was to be able to charge that vehicle out and about, because we used infrastructure that was designed for it. Shout out to Fastned with their tall canopies that allow that truck to go in. Shout out to Milence, who have just produced an incredible charging hub, and Ingenham in the northeast that opened just last week. We're starting to listen to that wider remit, but it's not actually through anyone's fault. This was a very deliberate evolution to start with the smaller vehicles, the low-hanging fruit, to test the payment software, to test the hardware, to test the policy and the regulations, and not forgetting there is public charge point regulations that do exist that state that a charger over a certain power, 50 kilowatts, will have to have a contactless terminal. In time, hopefully the cost model will allow all chargers to have contactless terminals, so we can have that panacea of all the ways to pay, and you pay how you want to pay. That's the thing. The driver changing vehicles, a genuine account, you pull down the sun visor, you take out your RFID card, that's what you use for the whole day. That's very difficult to think about from a large scale operation perspective for the shift from wet fuel to electrons. And I'm really encouraged to see what needs to stay behind the scenes, I would say. Mm-hmm. We need to work on this behind the scenes. The general public, the general driving public does not need to hear these complexities. We just need to work together with consortiums and get it right, and then roll it out. This is a test and learn process. Innovation takes time, and it feels hard because we are at the bleeding edge of it.
Matt?
I was lucky enough before my current role. I worked at Gridserve, and obviously when they put their first forecourt up, they made the canopies high enough for the lorries to pull in, and to see lorries pulling up or EHGVs pull in and charging was an amazing experience. We're going back to 5-6 years ago before I saw that. And I think what's only just happening now, which is actually the shame, is, to be fair, is everything's been designed around the passenger car. So what we are trying to do now is, and all the charging networks, is making the bays wider, longer for the commercial vehicles. What we're trying to do now is using our app is to identify those for the commercial drivers where they can charge their vehicle. So where they can charge their long wheelbase van, where they can charge the EHGV. And if it is an EHGV, does it have services that they need? Overnight stay, shower, function, all that kind of stuff, the minor stuff from last week, the announcement you saw. That's exactly what we want to pinpoint for the drivers, so they can see that all on one app. Then to touch on your case about multiple drivers in one vehicle, we all know the old days of the fuel card. Driver A, driver B hops in, use the fuel card, carries on, seamless. What we're trying to do is then add a bit more to that. Is you have public charging, you have home charging, but you have workplace charging, and then you have depot charging as well. And then we're trying to help the depots and workplaces to use their infrastructure they have on site where it's cheaper potentially than public charging. And then to pull in your vehicle, to pull in EHGV number one, he's got an hour on site, and then he's going to shoot off again. So plug the EHGV in and let it charge. But because it needs to go in an hour, give it as maximum power as you can. HGV 2, 3, and 4, then might only want to go out in 3, 4, 5 hours. So deprioritize those and prioritize a vehicle that's going to turn around quicker. So for us, what we're trying to do is not just think about public charging, it's thinking about home, public, workplace, all those elements, so we can give the fleet manager the best possible options, because not every company is the same. So that's what we're trying to do.
Okay. Neil?
So coming from a slightly different angle with regards to multiple drivers, the way that we've designed the Fleet 2.0. So one thing we're conscious of is, because cars are going out to drivers, if I'm a fleet manager, a lot of people see Visa and the first thing they think is, credit card. And so danger, someone's going to go and spend a lot of money on a credit card. So we've designed the card so it's completely adaptable to any situation. So the card can actually be assigned to a vehicle rather than a person, for starters. Or we can use virtual card issuance to push an individual card to individual drivers. So even if you've got multiple drivers, you don't have a card at risk of fraud in the glove box that you do today with a lot of multiple cards, where anyone can take it out potentially and use it. The thing that is really adaptable about our solution is you can turn it on and off at any point. So, for example, if you know when the driver's schedule is, you can just turn that card on during that schedule and turn it off for the rest of the time. So there's no risk that it can be used outside of that. You can lock it down to what we call merchant category code. So you could lock it down to just EV charging. So now we know that car can only be used by that driver while they're working for EV charging. So you start to build over the top these layers of security. And then obviously you've got the two-factor authentication, which comes into that as well. So I think we've been looking, like we've had to be conscious as we've been building the solution in Europe that there are so many different use cases. And I think this is what makes the market complicated. You can't just create one solution and say, there we go, everyone's happy. Every situation is different by the size of your, you're an enterprise business. Are you a plumber with 3 vans on the road? Like the use cases and the needs are so different, but some want to capture beyond fuel spend. So actually opening up merchant category codes for things like hotels because someone needs a night's stay, but putting £100 limit on it so that they don't go beyond. So I think for me, that's where a lot of the innovation needs to come from card issuers is who am I actually serving for and what are their end needs, and starting from the consumer, when I say consumer, end user, and working backwards to build a solution, not building a solution and trying to sell it and make it work for different users.
Okay. Question for Neil. We continue with you. That pops in. Neil, how do you get around PSD2 requirements when issuing cards directly to cars?
I'll be very honest. I don't know the exact answer to that, but we can come back to that and find out.
Perfect. Then a couple of questions to close the webinar. So to the audience, we still have a couple of minutes. So if there is another question that you would like to submit, please do so. Use the chat function. Happy to take your question. Back to the start. If you look at the ecosystem, there are still a lot of players. There are small players, big players, various countries. There are established ones. There are new ones. How to make the right partner choice? How to make sure that you as a customer, that you go with the right partner fit for your needs, your requirements, your business, loyal partner, not only today, but also tomorrow. Sarah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I'm going to break it down a bit. So in terms of the charge point operator networks with all those apps and all those partners, I do think we are seeing a consolidation, whether that's an acquisition play, where the smaller players boost the bigger ones, or whether that's a situation where it's one app to rule them all, but it's a completely open app. I'm talking about a plug and charge style thing, much like Matt's working on. Personally, I think it's a combination of all three. So it's all chargers are at a standard, all payment service providers are at a standard, and then that gives the driver flexibility. They won't even feel the difference. So you can still have all those players and profitable businesses which are scalable and they're growing every year, but the driver doesn't feel affected as part of that change. Now, I've just put something in the comments. Our payment charter is live. This is us pulling together as many professionals as possible to change that landscape. I'm escalating it all the way through Charge UK. I'm going to knock on number 10 at this rate, just to say it's not good enough. It's not fit for purpose. And you all know that. So let's work together to get something that means the mass adopters can thrive.
Okay, perfect. Coming to you, Matt.
So, I mean, to build on what Sarah said, there is going to be consolidation over the time, but we are taking it slightly differently. We would rather partner with all the players in the market to serve the end customer ultimately. But then, obviously, over the top of that, there is an element of trust, and I think I said that word a few times over this webinar. It's about trusting both the price element, about the access element, but also about customer service. So when the driver or when the fleet manager is it kind of needs help or needs backup or just needs an explanation, because all these companies are on a different stage of their journey as to who to turn to. And I think certainly from our group company, Octopus Energy, I think we've done that in spades. And what we're trying to do from that element down to what we're talking about now, charging, is what we're trying to do exactly the same. So having the trust and having that access is what we're trying to do.
Okay. Neil, what would you recommend, let's say, as some of the KPIs that customers should include if they have a tender exercise in terms of EV charging payment solutions?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's interesting. I think to get to back to your point with regards to the partnership side, like my belief in this space is that you have to partner to be successful. I don't think anyone can achieve anything on their own, and I think that's what's becoming apparent. And maybe that's what changes the industry slightly. We're working to try and bring partners together. So we've got an initiative called Visa Ready for Fleet to allow different solution providers to come together, so you can modularize and build solutions from that. Matt, maybe I'll pass to you because maybe a live event that you can talk about how that's coming in to support your business.
Yes, I mean, what we are trying to see, so what we are trying to do is, the world is trying to transition to EV. There's blockers that people can talk about all the time. So what we're trying to do is, as the trusted partner, is to actually then bring in the fleets that have mixed fuels. So people that have the diesels, the petrols, and how can we serve them with the customer service and all the other elements they might need under one roof. So we're working in partnership with Visa and obviously Neil. We will be launching a payments card, so Visa 2.0 backed payments card that launches in the coming weeks. So from a fleet perspective, they'll be able to move the EV charging and all the elements of EV charging I spoke about, home, public, workplace, but then also move their card services over to us. So if they need to fill up with their petrol, diesel, we'll have the Visa 2.0 card on the back. And this relationship is the start, and I think it will expand over the years. All the questions that have popped in, I think those will be covered in time. Having the ability to see the transaction data, the merchant data, the timestamp, all that will be visible to a fleet. But then to have all that under one, fleet dashboard or fleet platform is what we're trying to get to. So, I mean, the card that comes out in a few weeks, the Visa 2.0 card, is for fuel if it wants to be limited to fuel, but it also can be limited to the hotels, the travel, whatever the fleet needs is what we're trying to serve. But the bottom line for all of us is to help people get into EVs, and that's what's my kind of main goal, and the company's goal is.
Great. Okay. There is a final question that popped in. I'm going to read it. Someone of you can take it. Okay. Payment through ISO 15118 plugin charge could have been solved already years ago if the car manufacturers actually wanted to and tried. However, we've observed some pushback to the extent that the EU eventually saw it necessary to demand payment terminals available at all DC chargers. How can we make payments so smooth when car manufacturers or other players don't play along? Someone?
It's okay. Don't worry. It's coming. I was at Move, which is a big event in London last year, and I was so inspired. I even messaged my boss to say, my goodness, it's finally happening. But there is a strange position with OEMs, that old school nature to want to, what I call, own the customer, to make the driver feel like they should only download BMW Pay or Mercedes Pay or whatever the hell Pay exists, Hyundai Pay, whatever. I think that's going to be overruled. I think the consumer will vote with their wheels and override that demand.
Okay. You agree, Neil?
Yeah, I think so. And I think what everyone has to remember is everyone's trying to get to a place where we have this great experience, but every business needs to make money. And that's the reality of the ecosystem. And I think it's a new world where everyone's having to partner to the degree I think that we're having to. And I think that's great, but it's gonna take a bit of time for change and for people to adapt and see the opportunity, but also to work out how they'll commercialize it. OEMs want to sell vehicles. That's the reality. And so, as Sarah says, if it becomes a point where there's a hygiene factor required, and that's the end user demand, then yeah, of course they're gonna listen to that. But I think this is the challenge that we're seeing. Hopefully, like Sarah, every event I go to, everything I see, it's the collaboration between everyone is really the thing which keeps me motivated and think that we'll solve this stuff. It's just going to take a little bit more pain and time, I think. But
okay, Matt, if there is one thing what will revolutionize the EV charging experience for fleets, what is it?
Oh, that's a big one. I think to add on the previous question and to add on the answer to this bit, what we are seeing is OEMs are starting to to change their mindset from the years gone by. So what you'll start to see in the coming months is you'll have an app built directly into the vehicle, so like the Electroverse app. And what we are starting to see is that's coming more from the Chinese and the Korean manufacturers. They're really pushing that. They're really tech first. And I think the Germans and the American companies will follow suit very, very quickly. So having that technology in the vehicle is going to really be groundbreaking. So without having to pick up an app whilst driving to see, just log into the vehicle's media system, find your charger, and then all the fantastic stuff we've been speaking about now is how to pay. So they can pay directly in Plug and Charge. They can pay the card lodged. All those the great stuff is going to be there for the driver. I think that's going to really push the whole fleet perspective forward. But also we know from a fleet perspective is to give the drivers choice. So we have people that like a physical card in their hand, and they always will. We like the tech savvy people that just want to hop into an app or log into the vehicle. But giving our fleet customers choice continuously, but then also, again, I'll say it again, trust and price and transparency is really going to push the current state of play over the line.
Okay. Sarah, if you had a magic wand and could solve one issue, slowing down the process right now, what would it be?
For slowing down the process right now? Oh, the thing to get rid of the thing that's slowing down the process.
Currently slowing down the process, and you could solve that.
Yes, I think it would be much like we were saying, commerciality needs to be key. These businesses do need to thrive, but with a little bit more openness and honesty about where that money is kind of going proportionately would really help. I mean, the Plug and Charge situation exists. It needs to be turned on. What's the hesitation? So with everything in life, when there's a confusion, it tends to result in shutters down, battening down the hatches and keeping yourself to yourself. Platforms like this, webinars like this, thought leadership pieces like this help to really shine a light on the fact that demand is there. We just need to take time to, one of my favorite phrases, measure twice and cut once. My magic wand would be to be more open and honest as businesses behind the scenes to make things better for the consumer out there.
Neil, what would be your magic wand?
Yeah, I think I'd really follow what Sarah said. And I think I'd just add in the removal of the pessimism all the time. I think that we know everyone knows it's not perfect, but if we can get that collaboration with the right businesses to kind of create the success and everyone can share in that value, then I think that's what we need to get to. So I think it's there, but I think there's more that can be done for it.
Okay. The final question for all three of you, starting with Matt. What can you share about your business development in your company that will make EV charging more seamless and that today your customers don't know?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think I've covered quite a lot of it, to be fair. What can make it seamless? I think is listening more to the fleet drivers and the fleet managers as to what they want. So what we're trying to do all the time is to build products and to give them options. But I think what we'd like to do is to get into big networking opportunities where the fleet managers and the fleet directors can give us feedback on what they specifically want. What we're trying to do is always make a one fit approach for everyone. But I think some of these, particularly the bigger size fleets, do need bespoking, and I think we need to listen to them, because that will then really push up, that EV uptake. So I think that's my next goal from a business development point of view over the next year.
Okay, but good. Sarah, what can you share about your business development?
Thank you. Well, I think this webinar and our business is all about delivering that future vision. How can we make payments seamless? Payments are critical for a business success, a fleet success. And to take Matt's thoughts there, big fleets have always had that negotiation power to either get discounts or incentives from the main players. Those smaller fleets have not. So what can we learn from the wet fuel market and how they keep sticky customers coming back to their forecourts and buying their sausage rolls and sandwiches? And is there a way to make that appealing? Let's think about them as humans with holistic lives rather than humans driving vehicles. I think that's how we're going to unlock a greater economic benefit for these smaller fleets.
Okay. And then Neil, what can we expect from Visa?
Yeah, so we've recently launched an initiative called Visa Ready for Fleet. And so we are bringing on what it can be described as a marketplace of partners. And so I touched on this briefly. I think whilst we think of the payment card, you have to innovate around that. Okay, the payment's just one element, but the value proposition that you build around it is so important. So we're working with a group of partners, and this will continue to expand as and when we find the correct partners with the right solutions. And what this will do is allow businesses just to contract really seamlessly on different solutions. So as an example, CO2 reporting. So we've got companies on here which are able to support with regards to reporting back the emissions that are going on during these processes. It's becoming more and more important for companies to report, and they need to know this data. So that's an example. And then, you can talk about digital onboarding. So, some fuel cards today, I know, can take 2 weeks plus to get a card in your hand. So what's happening during those first 2 weeks? Whereas with digital onboarding, it can be instant. And then with a virtual issuance, virtual card issuance, a card can be in hand as well. So actually, driver on their first day at work doesn't wait 2 weeks to be able to pay. They're able to go live straight from the first. And that helps onboarding in a business. So I think our vision here is about, let's bring people together and companies together who can work together in order to kind of build those end-to-end solutions. And there's going to be strong entry into the market. And I'm delighted that Matt obviously announced that they'll be working on that as well very shortly. So yeah, that's what we're looking to do.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Neil. Keep us updated. The same to you, Matt and Sarah. If there is news about your business developments, we are of course interested to know more about it. And I think as well our audience, ladies and gentlemen, you have heard that Visa, PayTrue, and Octopus are working on a more seamless EV experience for you and for your drivers, which is of course great news. Thank you very much for having joined this webinar. I hope that you liked it. Of course, we would love to see you at the next event, and I can already tell that there will be also more webinars that we will organize with the support of Visa. Thank you very much to our guests and our experts, Matt, Sarah, and Neil, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Well done.
Stephen.
Thank you.